Let's talk about KEEL bolts. Today we move on to the next project. When I first bought this boat, it was probably my largest concern. When I looked at the KEEL bolts and the backing plate, I was a bit concerned by the rust. But as I've been watching this, it's progressively gotten worse, and I'm very much concerned about it and want to take care of it. The previous day, I made a list of the tools I would need for the project because the marina's about 30 minutes from my house and it's difficult to stop and drive an hour in the middle of the work. I had nearly everything I needed, but there were a few miscellaneous items I still needed to pick up at Harbor Freight and Home Depot. I didn't know it at the time, but this project would end up being a roller coaster. The day started with the intention of assessing the issue and prevent any further damage. At the project's peak, I thought the repair may exceed the value of the boat. Luckily, with a little patience and hard work, everything worked out. I started by opening the companionway and forward hatch for ventilation, but when I first started recording, the workers on the dredge started a really loud generator, so I decided to pause recording and get my tools sorted. Today we're going to tackle the next project on the boat, which is probably just as important as the mast failures that we found, and that is the KEEL bolts. When I first bought this boat, I noticed there was rust on the KEEL bolts and the backing plate. It was of concern to me. I didn't know a lot about boats at the time, but I trusted the broker who said it was just surface rust and nothing structural. I've been watching the rust progress. I can't ignore it anymore. It's really, really bad. So I've been on the forums to look, trying to find the bolts, even to replace the backing plate if possible. Now that would require me to have a haul out, which I'm not prepared to do right now. This is a really thick backing plate, so I think if I can grind off some of the rust, I'll be okay. But anyway, so I needed to find the bolts, and there was over 600 of these holes made, and there's not a single report of a keel falling off. But I certainly don't want to be the first. So let's go ahead and show you what I'm working with. Yeah, it's bad, really bad. When I hauled out initially for the bottom job, there was rust, but not to this caliber on the backing plate. So what I asked him to grind all the rust off and seal it. He didn't do very much of that. He was occupied with other projects, but he said he took off some of the bigger surface rust and threw a layer of paint on, which is what this white stuff that you're seeing is. Anyway, so I have the bolts. You know, there's a couple that are, you know, if I look at the hex head, that looks okay, but over here, this could get a little squirrely. In the forums, a lot of people showed really badly rusted heads, but as they started backing them out, the bolt itself was in good shape. That's my hope. This is an homage to Sailinglife, which is Oh Glorious Sanding. This is going to be Oh Glorious Grinding for the better part of today, I'm sure. The video doesn't show the true extent of the dust. This was the first test area to see what I was working with. More importantly, in this clip, you can see my green camera bag, which was exposed to the dust, which I quickly zipped up and moved back to the top side. So indeed, it's mostly surface rust coming off. You'll notice the cloud of rust when I hit it. I'm glad I got a mask because there's no way I could have sat in here and breathed that the entire time. Anyways, I'm glad I picked those up. I've decided to remove the rust from the bolt heads so I can soak them with some penetrating oil, hoping that if I let that sit for a little bit of time while I'm grinding the plate, that'll actually help them come out. So that's what I'm working on now. You see here, they're coming out decent. There's some bulky rust right in here, so let's see what this is and how far I need to go down to get to good metal. Even here, I'm trying to figure out if that's something that was from the manufacturer or if that's something they added behind it. At this point, I was optimistic because the rust was easily grinding away and revealing a solid plate beneath. From the looks of the aft-end plate, I knew it was going to be a lot of work, but there appeared to be something to work with. Everything's been going well. You can see that I can grind the heads and get them back into the shape to where they look like a bolt, but that came to a stop when I got to this back one. I'm grinding here and I don't see what even resembles a bolt head. It looks more like a weld. I do know that the back one here, that these four are the same size with this one significantly smaller. I think these are a T30 and I think this is a T16 or 14, I can't remember. I do know that this one is smaller. It's the one with the worst damage. I don't know how I'm going to get a socket or wrench onto that. I started with the wire wheel since it's more forgiving than the grinder. Plus I needed to be careful of the spine that is less than 2 inches from the bolt head. I am starting to see what resembles the head of the bolt, but there's about 20% of it that's absolutely gone on the back.
This was a test of patience, taking small steps forward without making the matter worse.
You can see full depth damage here. This is years and years of sitting in water. Because this plate is at least 1/4 inch, probably even thicker. And I think it's all the way down on this back bolt. So I'm gonna have to put a new plate or reinforce this somehow. I'm not familiar with this brand, maybe you are. It's all I could find. I'm used to liquid wrench, but I couldn't find any. So I've sprayed the heads, as you can see here. I'm gonna let this soak while I grind on the plate, and then spray some more on here in about 15-20 minutes. I'm hoping to get at least an hour of it penetrating and get these bolts out.
As I moved further down the plate, I found it easier to remove the thicker rust with a chisel and a hammer. I also thought the vibration of the tapping would loosen any rust around the bolt threads and allow the penetrating oil to get further down the shaft.
Okay, well that works a lot better. You can see this line here where it is just kind of, this is surface rust over here because you can see good material, and I can break off this with a chisel and hammer. Back here, we're full depth, I get that. You see these layers, look how thick this is. So that's gonna save me a lot of time of grinding, but I've lost a bit of metal here. So let me work on this. It's gonna be a lot more work, but I think that will save a lot of this smoke that I'm dealing with and a lot of time. I wish I would've got these big chunks that are coming out here. This is easily a 1/16 of an inch thick. You can see, yeah, now any big chunks are not gonna come out while I'm filming, but so take a look. You can see these large chunks that I'm removing. This is what I need to do to begin with. It's going to save me a lot of time, and we're getting down to good material versus just grinding away very small layers of rust. Well, let's hope none of this is load-bearing rust. It's gone from bad to worse on this back end. I mean, there's really not a plate left behind here. This is the entire keel plate. I don't know to stop here, or I really don't know what to do. I want to get this off because it's not going to get any better, and I was hoping to get the plate cleaned up and just remove these bolts one at a time so that I could do this in the water. But now I think I take a chance of all that weight pulling down, and if these bolts have been compromised in any way, we take a chance of catastrophic failures. Let me continue to think about how I'm gonna handle this.
As my grandfather always said, if all else fails, get a bigger hammer. While breaking up the rust with the hammer was rewarding, there was a sinking feeling in my gut because I didn't have a plan on how to finish the repair.
This is a bit more than surface rust. That right there probably weighs a pound. I'm annoyed right now, and some of that is directed at myself for not investigating this a little further. I don't even know how this plate is staying on here. Let me look at this. Well, all right. I gave Jim a call to find out if I should just stop, because I'm removing almost all the plate on the aft end. And so I've been hitting it, and I just, like at what point do I lose the keel because there's no backing plate? So he made a suggestion. We both made the assumption that this may be a plate that was added by a prior owner. And as we're looking at this, he said it may be a plate they put on top of a thin layer of epoxy, but we couldn't see that at the time. So now, just a few hits later, and you can see this section right here. Just what he said, there's a thin layer of epoxy, and look, there's textured fiberglass right there. So the manufacturer would have never put this plate on top of textured fiberglass. So this is starting to make a lot more sense. Now, the bigger question is, why did they put this plate on? But either way, it's got to come out. His idea was to cut a section of it out, replace these bolts and get it in place, and then come and do the forward section and replace it. Sorry, you got my legs in there. It's not a lot of room to work. But look at this mess. I mean, this is horrible. But now I'm feeling a little bit better about what I have. I think they just put in a very low-grade piece of steel, and it disintegrated and made me think it was the original backing plate. When I was looking online, I couldn't find backing plates for this boat. So now things are starting to make sense.
At this point, I decided to go back topside for some fresh air and to think about the best way to tackle the new development.
Here's that thin layer of epoxy that Jim suggested. You can see, look. Yeah, you can see right under it. There we go. All right, things are starting to make sense. Now, I have to ask myself, how close to these plates do I want to get? Because they put this for reinforcement. Why? I don't know. So they had some kind of issue.
Here I'm chiseling more of the rust away around the bolt heads to see if there's any more damage or if it's just the plates. I'm working in really odd angles. One, because there's not much room, and two, because I'm trying to work at an angle for the camera to see what I'm actually doing.
Now we can get a better look at what we have. So the revelation's actually working out in my favor, because I don't think this plate needs to be here. So what we might be able to do is just cut right here and back these bolts off one at a time and replace the washer, and even if we need to add a backing plate, we can do so. Once we get these secured, then we can come over here and exchange it and do these. But there's that epoxy that they laid down, and it's damp, so that's interesting.
Following the new plan, I'm cutting the plate into 2 halves so I can work in sections, since I'm still unsure what I'm going to find underneath the other half. I was overly cautious to avoid going through the plate and cutting into the gel coat and fiberglass.
The mysteries keep getting deeper. So I started that grind you just saw in the previous clip, and the top has this section of steel here, and it's deteriorated under that. So I'm confused what the construction of that plate was.
Notice a new set of legs in the frame.
What a good sign.
I was super excited that Jim came down to the marina to give me a hand.
The only thing, last thing that'll make me feel better is when I pull this bolt out and it's not got rust down yet.
Just before this, he had been pushing on the ratchet using his legs while I was on the other end keeping the socket straight and also pulling. The bolts didn't come off easily, but as you can see, they eventually came loose.
Look at that. That's what they were showing.
Since I could only work on one bolt at a time, I needed to find larger washers or a smaller backing plate to increase the surface size. I had found the specs, so I knew the bolt sizes, and the only place I could find them was at Gulf Coast Nut and Bolt Supply. They had the bolts when nobody else did, so I was hopeful they might have something that would work for me. Not only did they have larger washers, but they also had square backing plates that fit perfectly. I figured I would need to have these custom made at a machine shop and installed later, so I was excited when I learned that I could do this right the first time. Things were turning around until I realized my wallet was still on the boat. The guys at Gulf Coast Nut and Bolt told me to take the parts and pay them later. I ran back to the marina for my wallet, then across town to West Marine for anti-seize and life seal before coming back to pay my bill. If you're in the coastal bend and you need anything related to fasteners, I highly recommend these guys.
All right, let's pause for a minute and provide an update of where we're at. It got to a point where it seemed catastrophic that this was beyond repair. I reached out to Jim and sent him some pictures and was trying to get what he thought it might, what the problem might be or a possible solution. But we kept digging in deeper and deeper, and so as you've seen in some of those other clips, we found that they had put a plate down. They put a layer of epoxy, then put this plate down, and even it has got different layers of steel. So this is the top side of the steel, and then it was this less crumbly stuff under it. I made a cut here, and so the worst of it was this aft portion. And so if you look here, this is one of the holes. We've got this bolt out. There's no damage or anything, so we're not sure why they did this. We just don't know. So what I've done is I've gone to Gulf Coast bolt and nut, and they were able to, not only did they have the bolts in the right size, but we found these, and so they're going to serve as a backing plate here. So essentially what they did is just not the large plate, and actually is going to have some integrity to it, where this is all trashed right now. So we're really excited about that. The guys over at Gulf Coast were absolutely amazing. So what we'll do is, I got some anti-seize. We'll get that on those threads to keep them from sticking. And then I got some Life Seal, which came highly recommended to seal these up. So I'll put some of that on these plates in the top part of the bolts and get it down. We did loosen the first 4 bolts. We still haven't touched the back one because it appears that the head is still quite damaged. I might get the wire wheel after it some more to make sure that I have good threads, but we haven't started to see what it's going to look like to get that one off yet.
I used a wire wheel to clean and abrade the gel coat to ensure a solid seal between the surface and the backing plate. After a little bit of debate, I decided to use original manufacturer bolts. All I did was sand and clean up the head of the bolt so I could paint them.
Just putting a little bit of this antifreeze on so I can ensure that they'll back out. Okay, now we're going to put a little Life Seal on the back of this plate. Putting a generous portion of this. Most of it's going to squeeze out. And lastly, I'm going to put a little bit at the top of the head, bolt head here. I'm going to put a bead of it. Okay, here goes the first bolt. There we go, first one's done. Okay, take a look, we have another good bolt. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that one, just a head that's had a bit of rust on it. You'll notice that they've put a little pocket of epoxy here. It's very well bedded, so it don't make any sense for me to try to bring it up and jeopardize doing damage to the actual hole in the fiberglass. So I'm just leaving it in place. I ground it so I can get it nice bond. All right, I want to pause a minute to take a look. I still got a lot of cleaning up to do, but I have a properly secured keel now. Still, for the life of me, I can't determine why they had that plate. I couldn't find any damage, and I'm really excited with how this turned out, because you saw the video from where we started, and I thought that was going to be the end of this boat. Sun's setting, so I'm calling it a day. I've loaded up everything into the cart, about to head home. Let's take a quick look and show you our progress. So really the only thing we're missing is a little bit of cleaning and some paint. Let's go below. You'll see here. Wow, what a difference. I'm super excited. I have a lot of confidence in the attachment now. It looks better. I mean, it's dirty. I need to get in there and clean this. There's a lot of grime inside that textured fiberglass. Or I'm sorry, whatever it is, gel coat. I got some Rust-Oleum paint over here that I bought. I'm gonna go ahead and put that on top of these plates and the bolts, kind of give another layer of protection, kind of overdo it. And then maybe even repaint this bilge. I don't really need to, but I think it'd look really good. So that's it.
It's day 2 and I'm back at the boat to paint the keel bolts and backing plate. Most of the prep was done yesterday, so all I need to do is tape off the gel coat so the paint is limited to the bolt and plate.
I finished the first coat of paint, but the first thing I noticed was it seemed a little shinier than normal. I was in a rush when I went to Home Depot yesterday and didn't realize that I actually grabbed aluminum. So that's okay. I mean, it doesn't bother me. The color's insignificant. I wanted to get Rust-Oleum paint on here, so actually it might look pretty good. Anyways, I got the first coat on, and now I'll do the second coat while I was waiting for this one to get tacky enough to put the second coat on. So I got some drone footage of a couple of the sailboats out there in the bay. Curious to get home and see what that looks like. All right, let me get this second coat on, remove the painter's tape, and we'll be done with this project. So much for using painter's tape on textured surface. Normally you'd put painter's caulk down to keep it from running under the tape. I didn't worry about that, but I guess I should have. I'm gonna see if I can use some acetone to clean up this real quick. Even though I'm gonna paint the other surface, I wanna go ahead and see if I can clean this paint off. That's a wrap for this portion of the keel boat replacement project. Here's our final result. Really happy with this. We're gonna give the fiberglass a fresh coat of paint here in the weeks to come, but right now I am super happy with where we started and where we are now.